Welcome to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today, I want to talk about an article I came across on CNBC just a little while ago from author Li Yin Shan, entitled What CEOs Worry About Most. And they identified a few things in the article: cyber, energy security, leadership playbook changing, artificial intelligence, supply chain, and some other items. And I knew I had to get someone on the show to talk about that, someone who works with leadership quite a bit and had lots of conversations. I'd like to welcome to the show for his very first appearance, Senior Advisor at RCAS, James Strickland. James, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Alex. Thank you so much for having me on board. This is a great series that you've got going. I'm honored to be here.
All right, well, thanks for taking the time to talk to us today. Now, why don't we jump into some of these items? I mentioned some of them: supply chain, AI, etc. What are your thoughts working with CEOs and presidents and executives? Is this what's on their mind and why?
Yeah, 100%. There are so many things. It goes without saying that the world is now very volatile, uncertain at all levels, geopolitically, right down to individuals and the lack of stability that they feel. And we could talk all day about that, but I think we should really hone in, as you said, with CEOs and the C-suite, and maybe some of the things that have really changed fairly recently. And what I find is the first one I'll just chat about is the impact of AI, which is a big, let's use AI as being the kind of the overarching concept of machine learning and all the other things that go with it. Like that's I would say that's a disruptor, that's a game changer, that's a black swan event for all intents and purposes. Um, and I think one of the many challenges is that, let's be honest, CEOs and C-suite, they still, with exception, but they still tend to be of a certain generation. Um, and that generation, and you can see the gray hair, the concept of AI for a lot of them are either at the very edge of their ability to grasp or a little bit beyond. And I'm not degenerating CEOs at all. I just mean that we were raised a certain way. I remember when the internet came in. I remember buying my first laptop in 1986, which was groundbreaking, and it didn't even have a hard drive because that would never work. It's too sensitive. So it had two floppies. So, and I'm a bit of a techie guy, and so I've got some thoughts on AI. CEOs, there's such a difference between every CEO. They all approach and react to AI differently. So we can kind of go into some of the challenge that kind of brings out. And one of them would certainly be, I would say one of the biggest things is, it's obviously AI has given us so much more information and decision support. And that's
Mm.
those words are very carefully chosen because in my mind, AI does not make decisions. And that's because my theme is that although it's introduced a lot of speed, a lot of resources, and the ability to analyze and draw out themes very quickly, the other side of that is it's introduced a big chasm in trust. And we know
Yes,
that,
yes.
right? Because they all hallucinate to the point where I've obviously played with AI and I asked it to do something, and it was about, for me, about 75%, 80%. Hey, this is awesome, right? It's kind of like having a personal staff. But even if you have a personal staff, you're going to check their work and validate it because it's your name going on it. And there was a reference and a fact that I specifically asked the agent. I said, "Where did you get this? And what's the actual reference for this fact?" And it came back, "Good catch, James. That was actually a hallucination. It's not correct."
Hmm.
I was
Is
like,
that part of the challenge that CEOs are having? Is that their fear is that their, uh, I don't want to say their employees, but their organization may be using AI like that to make decisions, And then even though AI comes back with recommendations, taking it as gospel and then
Yeah,
making
100.
decisions based on that.
My goodness, yes, Alex, you nailed it. It affects all levels of the organization. The CEO themselves, regardless of their technical ability, um, as I said, there's a potential trust issue because at the worker level, let's say, um, one term that we're using is automation complacency. Is that
Mhm.
people will just go to AI for the answer, not for the information, right? And as we know, that is dangerous. So that means we have to impose some sort of human-centric governance, and that's a leadership function, and that's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Um, I do wonder how we're going to deal with the generation of employees that are going through universities right now, right? Because as we
Mhm.
know, there are students that use AI to produce the work that they should be producing, right? And universities, if you want to learn a skill, go to college. You want to learn how to think, be exposed, have a palette on which or a foundation on which you can build your professional house. Sure, go to university, but if that foundation was 20%, 50%, 75% built by large language models, then that foundation has got holes and it's not going to hold your structure as you go up. So
Right.
CEOs, I find, are really wondering, and then you add in the whole generational issue. Depending what industry you're in, you could have five, maybe even six different generations. And we've always talked about, oh, Gen Z's this and Boomers that. AI is even more influential on that.
Yeah. Well, that kind of leads to the next one of long-term planning. Is that becoming harder to do? Because you mentioned earlier geopolitical risks. What you just described now with AI and some generational things, is long-term planning becoming more of a challenge for CEOs now?
It sure is, and I really wish I could say it's just different, but it's not. It is more of a challenge, and it is different. The time frames for planning has to change. We go back 10 years, and software development is kind of where agile project management came from, right? Because the cycles are so quick, they have to be with software. Cool. Now everybody's cycle has to be quick because everything changes so quickly. Um, and so I think that is one of the big challenges that planners who work for CEOs are dealing with. And I would suggest that maybe a theme that I try to help leaders really take on board is we're not doing longish term planning as a predictive function like we used to. Okay, there's going to be more building in North America, so let's invest in concrete and the substrates that create concrete. Cool. That's predictive planning. That isn't as effective now. I focus on you always have to have a lead mark, of course, an idea where you want to go, and you'll never get
Hmm.
there. It'll adjust on the way. But it's now the long-termish planning for me is focused on the adaptability of your plan, of your organization, because we know it is going to change much faster than it ever has. So being able to absorb those changes. I think back to, again, I'm dating myself, but uh, 80s, 90s, before fuel injectors were created, right? Where cars ran on carburetors, and globally there was a big concern. Okay, the global oil reserves will last, I think it was for like 25 years. That's it. That's why you pick up a car from the late 80s in the United States, 55 miles an hour was the maximum speed limit because it was most efficient. Speedometers could only go up to, I think it was 100 miles an hour at the most. And then all of a sudden, fuel injectors were invented. And then, oh wait, global oil supply will last for another 100 years, right? Game changer, right? You can't
Yeah.
predict that, right? But you have to be prepared to absorb it, and that is all the more important now. Um, just a little sub theme to that when we talk about planning and how fast things change. I wish I could claim it, but I can't. I heard a quote that when we talk about reputations of companies now, reputational damage proceeds at the speed of social media. So when you're doing planning, if you don't have a plan for crisis management, crisis communications, and adjusting to the inevitable changes, then either by, maybe guilty by your absence in keeping up or actually being targeted in social media, if you can't get ahead of that curve, then you will literally not survive. And there's been companies that have learned that the hard way.
It's like long-term thinking is now short-term agile thinking. You've got to, you know where you want to go, but you've got to do it in little buckets instead.
100%, and it's hard for me. I spent the majority of my career as a senior special operations officer. So I will never say you don't have to do long-term planning. You absolutely do. It just has to be very nuanced, and you can't put all your eggs in that basket like
Right.
it was much easier to do before.
Yeah, agreed. So you kind of touched on this one with social media. Um, Cyber is another big concern, isn't it?
Yes, always has, not always. It has been ever since we had computers. It's certainly, we've hit an exponential growth. We will see another exponential growth once quantum computing becomes more accessible, once it's truly developed, and once it's more available. That is going to completely change the landscape, to the point where there's nefarious actors right now that are holding on to data that's encrypted until quantum computing becomes available, and then they will be able to reverse engineer, crack that, and then apply that moving forward. So, but to get back to your cyber thing, it's really interesting from a risk and resilience point of view, and me having a strong security background. Let's say 10, 15 years ago, as cyber really came into its own, like, oh my gosh, the term in kind of security and risk was convergence. And the whole thought was like, oh, we can no longer draw a line between physical security and cybersecurity, which is absolutely valid, right? Because it doesn't matter how good your firewalls are, your corporate IT. If the employee writes their password on a sticky notes and sticks it under their keyboard, which I have found, I can't count how many times as I did audits in my various companies, like really, then right. So we've got a physical cyber convergence, and then cyber became so advanced, everybody stopped talking about that because actually one person, it's really hard to have a really solid physical security, travel security, executive protection, all of that, and a solid time appropriate cyber ability. So it kind of disappeared, and now it's coming right back. Where I've got an interesting thought on kind of security and resilience careers now, where we do have to come back to the concept where you can't separate anything from anything anymore. Everything is
Right.
interrelated.
Everything is linked at some point, dependent on something else to operate successfully because you can't work in a quote unquote silo now.
Uh, It's funny you use that term. Absolutely. Silos have always been dangerous, but workable in the past, totally unworkable now. And so I see that we still need, as something like cyber, it's so technical. You still need those absolute experts that live in a dark room and plug into the matrix. Um, and yet at a much lower level in leadership or management, you need people that are conversant with how to use that, not exactly not the how things get done, but what happens. But they also have to be convergent with physical security, with with business KPIs, with the rest of the business, with stakeholders, again, at a much lower level than we saw before. So the concept of silos has been pushed down, where you need those absolute experts, And a lot of companies are turning to contracting that
Mhm.
because there you have people who are truly siloed and they can deal with their own leadership over there. So,
Well, that's all these items. I know we don't have time to touch on all of these, but it's really increasing the business risk. But at the same time, there's the existing risks that we had before that CEOs focused on. Now we're adding more risks and more nuance, more different flavors. If you go back 20 years, like you said, cyber was, you know, not that big of a deal for people. Well, maybe not 20 years, maybe a little further than that, but you get the idea.
yeah.
And now it's even more. It's getting harder and harder to grasp all of these risks because we're seeing the emergence of chief risk officers, chief resilience officers, chief X, YZ officer. So it's getting harder and harder for CEOs. Like there's more on the plate, it seems.
Yeah, there absolutely is, and I love that reference that we're actually recognizing that this is a borderline professional, like it's a profession being a chief risk officer. Many different paths to get there, and it's not as formalized as it will be, but absolutely necessary. I would also say, and I totally agree with what you're saying, Alex, is that we've got these old risks. Some of them we've been able to take care of, right? But basically speaking, we've got pretty well all those same risks, plus all the new risks and the volatility in the world. I would argue this is also an opportunity for CEOs, C-suites, companies to flourish from a leadership point of view, not a management point of view, but a leadership point of view. I find that employees at all levels, right from somebody working the floor, making sneakers, right up to the kind of mid to high level management, they all seek some sort of stability, and they're not getting it where we used to get it. There used to be, globally, we would know, okay, we're blessed to live in North America. We're kind of safe from military action. Okay, terrorism has changed that, right? Terrorism can hit anywhere. Uh, Globally, there's not many countries that can actually say they're safe from military action, as we've seen in the last few years. Um, there is a political stability, I would argue, in North America, in the Western world. We've seen that substantially change. And then at the individual level, job security, back when I graduated with my, math and science degree, my peers, I'm gonna get picked up by IBM, Nortel, Corel, and I'll do my career and then I'll have my pension. How'd that work out for Nortel employees, right? So the financial stability is completely gone. Throw in global pandemics, what? Like, we thought SARS was bad, then you have COVID. Now we've got potentially hantavirus, but it's not at the same level. But so getting back to my point, I think there is an upside, or at least an opportunity to flourish when a company can give their employees some level of stability at some level of stability at some level of leadership. It may not be the CEO, but if we can properly empower subordinate leaders within a company and really make their employees understand that, hey, you're part of the team. Am I going to lose my job to AI? No, but people who don't know how to use AI will lose their jobs. So let's make sure
Right.
you're prepared for that. So we can really strengthen our companies and our employees by focusing on the employees. All right.
Yeah.
So big concept, hard to execute. I don't have all the answers on that.
Yeah. That I think that's key, the employees. And I love what you said there. If you don't know how to use AI, then your job may be at risk.
Yeah.
I like that twist, because everyone thinks my job is going to be gone to AI. No, if you don't know how to use it, you're going to be gone.
Yeah.
They'll get
Yeah.
someone in else who knows how to do it. So,
And that's not unlike the Industrial Revolution and
mhm,
everything else. When there's these black swan inventions, we have to adjust the workforce to it.
right. And we've come to the end of the episode. Any final thoughts you'd like to share on what's keeping CEOs up late at night? What worries them?
You know what? Appreciate the time. I love what we've discussed, Alex. I would come back to one of the biggest things that CEOs are worried about is the rate of change, and I'm lumping AI into that. It's the rate of change of everything, including generational views on loyalty, right, towards their company, and companies' view of loyalty to their employees. So the rate of change, and so I would say this. So what to that is that a CEO is not constantly thinking about what's changing. How do I get at, if not ahead of that change, how do I prepare? If at all possible, you can not just be resilient, but as we talked about, presilient. You can look at the changes that are coming and actually benefit from them because you're prepared and you can stand out in your industry. Uh, and that is incredibly challenging and it requires resources, people.
Yeah,
And they're not revenue generating immediately, so they're always challenging to dedicate resources to.
right. On that note, we've come to the episode. James, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today. I really appreciate it.
Alex, it was very interesting. I really enjoyed the time, and there's so much to talk about. Thanks very much for what you're doing. This is great.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.